On November 22, 1963, all of Dallas, Texas was abuzz over the visit of President John F. Kennedy and his wife Jackie. Throngs of people crowded along the roads as his motorcade snaked its way through the city. A Dallas dress manufacturer named Abraham Zapruder stood in a small crowd with his home movie camera, waiting for the President of the United States to pass by. As Kennedy's motorcade turned the corner into Dealey Plaza, Zapruder put his eye to the viewfinder and began filming. This unassuming man, using an ordinary camera, captured a seminal moment in the history of America. Indeed, in the entire history of the 20th century. In March of 1997, at the National Archives II in College Park, Maryland, a replication of this moment in history began. For 5 days, photographers painstakingly reshot the film frame by frame, from Zapruder's camera original to 4x5 transparencies. This reproduction is the first time a copy of the film has been made from the original since the day of Kennedy's assassination.
It appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route. Something, I repeat, has happened in the motorcade route. Parkland Hospital, there has been a shooting. Parkland Hospital has been advised to stand by for a severe gunshot wound.
On the morning of November 22, 1963, Abraham Zapruder went to his place of business, Jennifer Junior's of Dallas, quartered in the Daltex building. The building stands on the northeast side of Dealey Plaza, directly across the street from the Texas School Book Depository. Kennedy's motorcade would pass by the building and through Dealey Plaza on its way to a luncheon at the Dallas Trade Mart. Zapruder owned a Bell & Howell Model 414 PD home movie camera that was considered double 8mm format.
The original 8mm technology is called double 8. And what it really amounts to is an amateur's camera is designed to take a roll of film, a spool of film, that's 25 to 30 or 33 feet in length and is 16 millimeters wide. The camera person would load the film in the camera, expose those first 25 feet, but they'd only expose one edge of it, one 8mm width down that 16mm piece of film. After exposing the first run of it, the spool, which is the film which is now on the take-up spool, is reversed, put up on the supply side. The empty spool then goes on the bottom, the camera is rethreaded, and the other side is then exposed. The film then would go to a processor who would process it, develop it, or print it, whatever is appropriate, on equipment that's designed for 16mm wide film. 16mm is a standard audiovisual medium. Ultimately, then the film is split into two 8mm widths. The two 8mm pieces are then spliced end to end. And what started out life as a 33-foot piece of 16mm wide film ends up to something like 50 or 60 or 66 feet of 8mm wide film.
On the morning of November 22nd, Zapruder decided not to take the camera with him to work. Marilyn Sitzman, one of his assistants, recalls what happened.
He didn't bring his camera. So his assistant, Lillian, and I persuaded him to go get his camera, that he needed to take these pictures for his grandsons and for his children and etc. And we knew he really wanted to take the pictures anyway.
Zapruder accompanied a group of workers from the dress factory to Dealey Plaza to watch as the Kennedys passed.
And we're talking about, well, where can he stand? Because by this time there was quite a few people gathering. And we'd go look at this place, and we'd go look at that place, and we went over that concrete paraquat was, and we decided that would be the best place, because I said you can get up here, you'll be above everybody. No matter how many people are down here, you won't have anybody blocking your view. He had vertigo, though. If he got up there, he'd get dizzy. So he said, you'll have to stand behind me and hold on to me. I said, it's no problem at all. So we both got up there, and I stood behind him, and I held on to him. When they started to make their first turning into the street, and he says, "Okay, here we go," or something to that effect.
Zapruder never took his eye from the viewfinder as he shot the film. As the horrifying news of the shooting traveled through the streets, a stunned Zapruder began walking to his office. As he was leaving Dealey Plaza, he ran into Harry McCormick, a reporter for the Dallas Morning News, and told him about the film. McCormick arranged to meet back in Zapruder's office, but first, he wanted to find Forrest Sorrells, an agent he knew from the Dallas Secret Service field office, to inform him of the film. Zapruder's partner, Erwin Schwartz, recalls when he first heard of the film.
And I went with another friend that lived pretty close to there to go to his house to turn on the television. And that was when I heard Walter Cronkite say the president is dead.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
And I picked up the phone and I called the office. And I hear screaming and turmoil. And I said to the girl, I said, "Mildred, what's going on?" She said, "Oh, Mr. Schwartz, the police are here with shotguns." I said, "What are you talking about?" And she said, "Oh, Mr. Z has the films and they want the films, and he told me to put it in the safe." I said, "Are they in the safe?" And she said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Lock it." "Where's Mr. Z?" She says, "He's in his office crying." And she went and got him, and he picked up the phone and he said, Erwin, it was terrible. I saw his head come off." I say, "I'll be right there."
When McCormick arrived at Zapruder's office with Secret Service agent Sorrells, the men accompanied Zapruder and his partner to have the film processed.
So I went and opened the safe, and I got the camera. The film was still in the camera, and we took it downstairs, and he told the uniforms, the two uniformed cops, "You have a car?" And they said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Let's go."
McCormick believed the film could be developed at the Dallas Morning News, so the men went there. Finding no motion picture processing at the newspaper, they walked next door to the paper's television station, WFAA. Hearing of the eyewitness in their studios, producers at the station put Zapruder on the air and interviewed him on live TV.
A gentleman just walked in our studio that I am meeting for the first time, as well as you. This is WFAA TV in Dallas, Texas. May I have your name, please, sir?
My name is Abraham Zapruder.
Mr. Zapruder?
Zapruder, yes, sir.
Zapruder. And would you tell us your story, please, sir?
I got out and, about a half hour earlier and get a good spot to shoot some pictures. And I found a spot, one of these concrete blocks that I have down near that park near the underpass. And I got on top there. There was another girl from my office. She was right behind me. And as I was shooting, as the president was coming down from Houston Street making his turn, it was about halfway down there, I heard a shot. Then he slumped to the side like this. Then I heard another shot or two. I couldn't say what it was, one or two. And I saw his head practically open up, all blood and everything. And I kept on shooting. That's about all. I'm just sick again.
I think that pretty well expresses the entire feelings of the whole world.
Terrible.
You have the film in your camera. We'll try
Yes,
to
I brought it on the studio now.
We'll try to get that processed and have it as soon as possible.
In the meantime, McCormick discovered that only Kodak could develop the film. He made arrangements with their processing plant in Dallas to do it. When the men arrived at Kodak, Sorrells received a phone call and was ordered to return to downtown Dallas. A suspect in the assassination, named Lee Harvey Oswald, had been detained. Another onlooker in Dealey Plaza, Phil Willis, had taken slides at the time of the assassination. He too was at the Kodak plant having the slides processed. Before Sorrells left the plant, he arranged to receive copies of the Willis slides as well.
Harry McCormick stayed with us. And sure enough, the fellow said they're ready to be seen, and we went into a viewing room.
While there are conflicting stories about what day the film was shown, It is certain that the Zapruder film was first screened in the projection room at the Kodak plant. Phil Chamberlain, who was production supervisor, recalls the first showing.
So when that film came off the processing machine, Mr. Zapruder was there, and he and I and quite a group of our people, probably about 15 in all, went in the projection room to see what he had on his film. And he started out, as we were threading it up, apologizing that he really didn't know what was on the rest of the film, that he wasn't much of a photographer.
Then Zapruder's film came on, and number one, it was needle sharp. Two, the color was beautiful. The focus was locked in perfect.
On film was only, I believe, 22 seconds long. And in that last shot, you see his head come off. And I mean, you could see it so clear. I've seen all these replicas and all the copies, nothing like that first one.
All during the sequence of pictures of the movies, there's not a sound except the projector. And when the projector was turned off, it had to have been 3, 4, or 5 seconds like this, nothing, when one voice said, "My God."
Upon seeing the film, the Secret Service immediately asked for copies.
The Kodak man said, "You'll have to take it to Jameson." I'd never even heard of Jameson. He told us where it was. I think he called him, but I'm not sure.
Even under these high-pressure circumstances, mere hours after he witnessed the president's murder, and with the Secret Service tracking his every move, Zapruder had the wherewithal to obtain affidavits from Kodak and the Jameson Laboratory stating the specific work they did. The first affidavit, signed by Phil Chamberlain, shows the work for the processing of the original film.
And Zapruder and the Jameson people signed the agreements that there wouldn't be more than 3 copies made. And they made the 3 copies. And we had to take those copies to Kodak to get them developed.
After the duplicates were processed at Kodak, Zapruder and Schwartz drove to a downtown police station. On Friday evening, November 22nd, Zapruder gave 2 of the 3 copies of his film to the Secret Service. By that time, Air Force One, containing the body of the slain president, and the newly sworn-in president, Lyndon B. Johnson, had already landed in Washington, D.C. Once the news community heard of the Zapruder film, they clamored for the rights to it. Life magazine was especially fervent in its desire to get the film. Richard Stolley, the Pacific Coast editor for Life, flew into Dallas the afternoon of the assassination. In an interview before a live audience, Stolley recalls his weekend in Dallas.
And I went into the Adolphus Hotel to set up an office. And I'd been there about an hour or 2, and I got a phone call from one of your distinguished, Patsy Swank. She had gotten word from a colleague that a local businessman had photographed the assassination from beginning to end with an 8mm home movie camera, and she phonetically pronounced his name. And I picked up the Dallas phone book and ran my finger down the Z's, and there it was, Zapruder, Abraham. I called him, no answer. I called every 15 minutes for the next 5 hours. And at about 11 o'clock, this weary voice answered. I said, "Is this Mr. Zapruder?" "Yes." I identified myself. I said, "Is it true that you photographed the assassination?" "Yes." "Have you seen the film?" "Yes." "Did you get it from beginning to end?" "Yes." "Can I come out and see it?" "No."
Zapruder told Stolley to meet him at the office at 9 o'clock the next morning. Stolley was waiting there at 8.
And he looked slightly annoyed, but when I came in, but he said, "Well, you might as well come in and see this," because he'd invited the Secret Service at 8 o'clock. So it was a little room. He had this ancient 8mm projector. This is tiny film. There's no sound. The only sound was this creaky projector. Meanwhile, other press are beginning to gather outside. Mr. Zapruder says, Mr. Stolle was the first reporter to contact me, so I'm going to talk to him first. The rest of the press went ballistic. You promise us you won't sign anything, you've got to talk to us before. Promise, promise, and they were acting badly. So we sat down, and I said to her, I said, Mrs. Zapruder, when life occasionally encounters pictures of more than normal interest, that we will pay more than our normal space rates. I'm trying to be as casual as hell about all this. And I said, now, for instance, that piece of film we just saw, I said, you know, we might pay as much as $5,000 for that. And he gives me this kind of quizzical look and then grins. The whole point of that was to find out, did he know? And yes, he knew. So we just went up by increments, little by little. I got to $50,000, and I said, Mr. Zapruder, this is truly as high as I can go without calling New York for authorization to go higher. He looked at me for a few minutes or a few seconds and said, let's do it.
By noon on Saturday, less than 24 hours after the assassination, Life magazine had bought the print rights from Zapruder for 2 payments of $25,000. Stolle received the camera original and the last copy of the film. To avoid other reporters clamoring to buy the rights, Stolle left through a back exit. By Saturday evening, the 23rd of November, Zapruder's film was at Life's printing plant in Chicago.
We carried the film to Chicago because the editorial site had moved to Chicago, which is where we printed the magazine then, and they were holding the magazine open. We threw out 300,000 covers. They stopped. As soon as we heard of the assassination, they stopped printing the magazine, threw all but a few stories out in the back, threw the cover out, and then we began putting together. Part of it was the history, part of it was the reaction around the world, and the current story was what was happening in Washington and down here. So this film went up to an editor in Chicago, and they printed, a dozen or more frames in black and white. They couldn't do it in color at that point.
While the original film was in Chicago, a copy was sent to New York. Sometime on Sunday, the publisher of Life magazine, C.D. Jackson, saw the 26-second film. Jackson decided the American public was not ready for such graphic images of the president's death and instructed Stolle to buy the motion picture rights to the film as well.
I called him on Sunday evening and I said, I'd like to come back and see him about getting the additional rights. I have to say he seemed relieved.
On Monday morning, Stolle met with Zapruder and his attorney, Sam Passman.
We sat there. It couldn't have taken more than 15 minutes. I knew, again, where I could go. It was another $100,000. It was a total of $150,000 for all rights.
By the time of JFK's funeral on Monday, November 24th, Time Incorporated owned all rights to the Zapruder film. In its November 29th issue, the magazine published black and white frames from the film. In the following issue, color frames were published. A week after the shooting in Dallas, President Johnson created a special commission to investigate Kennedy's assassination. Known as the Warren Commission, after Commission Chairman Chief Justice Earl Warren, the group of former and then government officials were to oversee the investigation and give their stamp of approval to the conclusions. During the investigation, the Zapruder film was examined closely by the commission staff, but the print they used was a second-generation copy made by the FBI from one of the Secret Service copies. Some of the investigators wanted to look at a better copy, and requested that the original film be borrowed from Time Incorporated. A representative from Life's photographic lab brought the film to Washington and projected it a few times for the investigators. 35mm slides were made of some of the frames. When the commission published its findings, one volume contained black and white stills made from the Zapruder slides provided by Life. Researchers looking at these reproductions noticed that some of the frames were missing and that splices were clearly evident. Critics of the Warren Commission suspected a cover-up, claiming the missing frames revealed something conspiratorial. In 1967, Life magazine offered an explanation. Photolab technicians damaged the film when making copies and reproducing still frames. Specifics on how or when the accidents occurred were never given. In 1969, New Orleans District Attorney Jim Garrison indicted a local businessman, Clay Shaw, for conspiracy to kill President Kennedy. During the trial, Garrison subpoenaed the Zapruder film from Time Incorporated, using the conclusions drawn from the film as evidence of conspiracy. Abraham Zapruder was called as a prosecution witness to verify that the film Garrison received from Life was indeed the film Zapruder took the day of the assassination. On February 13, 1969, in a packed courtroom, Zapruder's film was shown in public for the first time. By the end of the trial, it had been shown 9 more times. With the film in his possession, Garrison made sure duplicates were made. A conspiracy believer, Garrison wanted the bootleg copies to be distributed to colleges and universities across the country. After seeing the film, he believed the students would demand the assassination investigation be reopened. One of these bootleg copies was the centerpiece of a presentation called "Who Killed JFK?" that traveled across the country in the mid-70s. Zapruder never saw the widespread public reaction to his film. He died in Dallas on August 30th, 1970, of cancer. On March 6, 1975, the Zapruder film was broadcast for the first time on television on an ABC talk show called Good Night America, hosted by Geraldo Rivera. The guests that evening were comedian and human rights activist Dick Gregory and photography expert Robert Groden.
It's become very chic among television producers to put a disclaimer at the head of any film. The film you're about to see might be shocking, it might be horrifying, you might not want your kids to watch it. And I think the unfortunate net effect of that is to make more people watch it. Well, I'm telling you right straight out that if you are at all sensitive, if you're at all queasy, then don't watch this film. Just put on the late night movie because this is very heavy. It's the film shot by the Dallas dress manufacturer Abraham Zapruder, and it's the execution of President Kennedy. And Bob and Dick, would you please narrate what we're seeing as we show this film?
This is commercial footage leading into Dealey Plaza. This is the car on Main Street.
So this film was taken by actual newsmen. This was spliced together with the Abraham Zapruder film?
Yes.
All right, so this is the beginning of the motorcade.
Okay, what you're seeing now is in slow motion so that you can grasp what is happening. This is a film taken by Marie Muchmore that leads into the Zapruder film. It's for time continuity. The president is waving to the crowd here.
And Jacqueline Kennedy, of course, is sitting alongside him in the open car.
Right. This is from Orville Nix's film. This is originally 8mm footage, and they're heading now toward Elm Street. They're on Houston Street now. They're going to make a left-hand turn. It's on the corner where they're going to make the turn there that the book depository was. Now, this is the Zapruder film.
Okay, so the cars are coming along now into Dealey Plaza?
Yes, these are the lead motorcycles of the motorcade.
All right, now with the President and Mrs. Kennedy is also Governor Connolly.
Right. Now, before he goes behind the sign, the President is waving to the crowd. When he comes out from behind the sign, he is shot, then Governor Connolly is shot.
He's already been hit?
He's already been hit.
And now?
At the bottom of the screen, the headshot.
That's the shot that blew off his head. It's the most horrifying thing I've ever seen in the movies.
Now, the Warren Commission said that all of the shots were fired from behind by Lee Harvey Oswald, a lone assassin, firing at the president. And as you could see, clearly, the head is thrown violently backwards, completely consistent with the shot from the front, right. Now, this is an extreme blow-up of just the president from the film.
All right.
Coming out behind the sign, he's shot.
He's hit from
He's hit here.
From the front, too. He's hit
From the front. Now, Jackie doesn't realize what's happened yet. She goes to his aid.
And now?
The Zapruder film, at the time of this unauthorized screening, was still owned by Time Incorporated. The film broadcast that evening belonged to Grodin, who claimed it was made from the original film, but gave vague explanations on how he obtained the copy.
That's the most upsetting thing I've ever seen. We'll talk about it in a minute.
As the public interest in the Zapruder film and conspiracy theories grew, criticism mounted toward Time Incorporated's perceived suppression of the film. The publisher tried to thwart the criticism by returning it to the Zapruder family. On April 9, 1975, Time Incorporated returned the Zapruder film for $1 to the LMH company, consisting of Zapruder's wife, Lillian, and his two children, Myrna and Henry.
In June of '78, the Zapruder family themselves contacted the archives and asked if we would agree to put the original film into courtesy storage for them so that it could have proper environmental conditions and temperature and humidity control. And we agreed. And a simple receipt was drawn up in 1978, and the film was brought to us and has been here ever since. Well, there's restricted access to the film. It's in a security cabinet kept in the freezer and vault, and access is provided through the supervisors in the motion picture, sound, and video branch, like myself, and we periodically authorize the film to be taken out, to be examined and inspected and checked in that manner. And I've taken care of that film now for 19 years.
The public's accessibility to the original is strictly limited, however.
If somebody wanted to view the original film, they would need to contact LMH Company for permission. If they went to the archives first, the archives would call us on the telephone or drop us a note indicating that there was somebody who wanted to view the original film, and they would ask us if this person could have access. We generally find that researchers understand that the handling of the film could result in a breakage of the film. In fact, the researchers are usually more aware of that than anyone.
With the advent of digital technology, the LMH company decided to create a state-of-the-art archival copy of the original film.
In the past, archival efforts resulted in damage to the film. Twice before, in running it through gates for 8mm film, it's been damaged. Now we have a way of copying the images and reproducing them in a way that we don't have to run it through a gate, and it can be accurately reassembled, and the information can be provided without the risk of damage.
When the decision was made to go ahead on the project, Silverberg contacted Joe Barabee, Director of Scientific Imaging at Macrone Associates in Westmont, Illinois.
He identified himself as being a representative of the Zapruder family, of the Zapruder estate, and that they were interested in having this film blown up frame by frame, magnified, to reconstruct a videotape from that. Probably more than anything, the area in which I specialize is photomacrography. It's sort of a cross between microscopy and standard photography, and there are many problems that have to be solved in that range. And that's exactly what this project entailed.
Barabee gathered the equipment he needed and shipped it to National Archives 2 in College Park, Maryland, where the shoot would take place. From the first day of preparations, MPI Teleproductions was present to record the process. The lens used was a Zeiss Luminar 40 with an f/4.5 and 12 times magnification. The film was Kodak 6121, a transparency duplicating film in the 4 by 5 inch format. Besides choosing equipment, Barabee had to create a system to transport the film through the camera. While this system had to allow him to work quickly, it also needed to be archivally sound, especially in terms of chemicals and the film's physical safety. A simple construction was also key. Barabee and his assistants built a transport system that would hold the entire length of the 25-foot film.
The film is stored at the U.S. National Archives at College Park in a temperature and humidity controlled vault at 25 degrees Fahrenheit and 30% relative humidity. The process for taking the film out is to move it from that 25-degree environment into a 50-degree environment for about 24 hours so that the film can warm up a bit, not be brittle, and if there's going to be any condensation, that condensation will be on the outside of the film can that the film is stored in, or the plastic bag in which the film is actually placed.
Polyester sleeves held the film in place and protected it as it moved toward the camera. Beneath the camera, the sleeve would be removed and the photograph taken. Final calibrations of the camera setup were necessary before the shooting could begin.
When you have approximately 500 photographs, individual photographs, you want a high degree of consistency from one photograph to the next. So any variable that you can eliminate, that you can get under control, you want to. So we used film of all one emulsion number. We used one bulb throughout, which was of concern because this is a large number of photographs to make with one bulb. So we had 3 bulbs tested. Exposure had to be absolutely consistent, and color balance had to be absolutely consistent. I used a photographic timer, which would give me very precise timing of the exposure.
Each frame of the film was enlarged and reproduced on the 4 by 5 format, and the entire frame of the film was reproduced from film edge to film edge, including all information between the sprocket holes.
The film frame is fairly standard. It's sort of 4 units wide and 3 units high. It's kind of a rectangle. But it was not uncommon for 8mm cameras, and perhaps some 16mm cameras, to shoot some additional image between the perforations, between the sprocket holes.
I think there have been instances where there's been a question as to what's between sprocket holes, what the sprocket hole information is, or there's a need to examine a break in the film or something like that. One of the reasons for doing what we've done in making the reproductions of each of the frames in a 4 by 5 format is to reproduce the sprocket hole information and to reproduce the break information so that that can be analyzed by anybody who needs to look at it.
In processing, the same care had to be taken with the exposed transparencies.
At the beginning of the project, when they first came into town with their camera and their enlarger head, it was necessary for us to balance their film to our processor. So the first thing we did was run a series of tests to balance the enlarger to our machine.
Once the photography began at the archives, the exposed film came quickly to the processing plant.
As the film comes in, it goes straight back and straight onto the machine. The quantity of film has been so great that it's really been a non-stop process. Once the film is dry, after it has gone through the chemical process, it is then pulled out of the machine and unclipped from the rack that it has gone through it on. As the film comes off, it is inspected for defects or flaws, problems that they may have had within the shoot itself, for dust or for curl of the film. From there, it is able to be sorted depending on the frame number and sleeved within individual sleeves and put into a binder. At that point, it then goes back to the archives for inspection by the people who shot it.
With the processing finished, the set of the Zapruder film still frames was complete in transparency format. Then, using state-of-the-art digital technology, those still frames were returned to a motion picture format.
We had to take what would be the equivalent of someone taking a regular still camera and being able to shoot it at 18 frames a second and put that back together into an image sequence.
The first step in the reanimation process was to scan the individual transparencies into the computer.
We scan in each image individually, and we have an image sequence of approximately 480 frames that we have to put back into a sequence so that moves again. We scan these at much higher resolution, up to 1500 dots per inch resolution, so that we could blow up the footage and have enough image on the outside of the area to motion track everything.
Once all the transparencies had been scanned, each of the individual pictures were registered to one another. That is, the images were lined up perfectly using the sprocket holes and frame edges as reference points. Registration is essential for seamless motion when the frames are animated back into a moving sequence.
Well, once we stabilized all the footage and made sure everything registered very well, then we took another pass, a finer registration or a motion stabilization pass that stabilized the original camera jitter to get rid of any motion that may have been an artifact of handheld cameras. We're able to go inside the actual image and look for areas of contrast to stabilize the picture within that environment.
Using the digital tools available today, the technicians brought out as many details as possible from the original optical print.
The camera goes through many different angles, and there are different levels of exposure that the camera wasn't able to correct, and there were some dark areas towards the end where we were able to get more out of the film and to ramp those levels up and down as the camera passed through the sequence, which I think looks a lot better than the original footage, and it was non-destructive.
Most of the dust and scratches on the original film were removed. The frames around the splices, however, were so damaged they were impossible to restore without adding digital artifacts to the image. In the final sequence, those traces of the damage are left intact. Next, the various versions of the film are sequenced on the computer.
Then I do this process, what we call rendering, which all that really is it resequences the individual images into an image sequence that we are able to play in real time for 18 frames a second of our production for television.
At this final step in the process, this new motion picture footage is archived in its original resolution, and in this digital format will always reproduce without any image degradation. This is the first of the digital versions and is shown without the images between the sprocket holes. The framing is the standard format. This is a replay of the standard format version, this time in slow motion. The images between the sprocket holes could only be seen on slides of the original film. This is the first time that those images can be seen as part of a motion sequence. Zapruder frame numbers are also displayed for research purposes. This is a replay with the images between the sprocket holes, this time in slow motion. This version tracks the limousine and maintains President Kennedy and Governor Connally at center frame. This version is only in slow motion. This version zooms in on the image as much as possible without causing deterioration. President Kennedy is kept at center frame. This is only in slow motion. These images, decades later, are still disturbing. From one view, they show a young man cut down in his prime. From another, this is a president who gave so much to so many, assassinated before those hopes could be fulfilled. These images are the legacy of one man, a man who never met John Kennedy, but whose name, Zapruder, is inextricably linked to Kennedy's and to Kennedy's death. Abraham Zapruder, an unassuming man with an ordinary camera, who unwittingly captured a seminal moment in American history.